Hello. Wow, has it been a minute since I've done a solo episode? An update? I think it has been. Turn this on so I can hear myself. Maybe. Sort of. I think. Wait a minute. Is it working? I think it's working. I don't know. But I will fix this and you'll hear me at some point. So, welcome to a coffee break update. One of those rare solo times that I, your host, Faith Jacobs of Coffee Break, am here to do an update. This is going so well so far. So you might have noticed in the last couple of days that I had on two guests. Great guests, amazing. But now I'm gonna do a few housekeeping things, 'cause that's important. So first things first. In the description below, you will be finding several links. One is to my link tree, which will take you to my website as an actor, and as well as a link to my author's webpage, which eventually will be available on a brand new and revamped link tree. I promise that's coming, because a lot has happened, and my old link tree available on my social media does not necessarily reflect everything that I am now. Second, the other link tree that you'll see, link tree. The other link that you'll see that is not yet on the link in the description below, but eventually will be, is that, and I am so excited to announce, although it has been up for quite some time, I just haven't been very good at announcing it places where maybe it might reach more ears, is that yours truly, me, has embarked on the path of shop owner through Redbubble. Yes, that is right. The Coffee&Comics Creations store. Yes, it's a mouthful, but that's what I'm stuck with. So there's the branding. But the Coffee&Comics Creations store is now open for business, where I am selling, most excitedly, coffee break podcast and bookish themed merch around my projects, which I've probably spoken about on here very briefly, back with an episode titled My Autistic Identity, and talking about Jacob Faust, who is a main character from my project Chaotic Idiots. So what you'll be seeing from the Coffee&Comics Creations store's storefront is mainly bookish and podcast based merch. So things like Chaotic Idiots, we've got Faithfully Yours Mozart, if you're familiar with my marketing for the Mozart series. Like I mentioned before, there's coffee break t-shirts, and duvets, and pillows, and mugs. We have art prints, we have hoodies. There is anything and everything you can think of in terms of reasonable merch. Now, be forewarned, I don't control the prices. That's kind of on Redbubble. But Redbubble, like any good website, has sales. So I would encourage you to take advantage of anytime they have a 30% off sale, or if they have, a buy two, get 20% off, take advantage of that. I too believe that $19 is much better for a t-shirt than, say, $30, but I digress. However, I do control what I upload, so I'm most excited to share this with everybody who has ever listened. I think there's 7 of you who listen to this podcast. That's amazing. Thank you for the 7 listeners that I have. Really trying my best to grow this podcast, but it's been a slow 8 years. I do everything. I do so much. Okay, so third, as mentioned, that I'm doing bookish merch. I am an author. For those who have been here long term, you might have heard me talk about my audio dramas, of course, whenever I have had on guests such as my friend Jack Morby, or when I have spoken to people like Aaron Ralph, and of course Darian, who is playing Constanza in Faithfully Yours Mozart. When I have had those people on, we mainly talk about the projects that we've been a part of. So, I should say this here. I said it on my social media. I know my regulars are aware of this, but to my wider audience who doesn't know, I began my journey as an author in December of 2024. I published Faithfully Yours Mozart, and since then, subsequently, 6 books have been published for varying different genres and books. And in the words of my favorite podcaster, James Arnold Taylor, an actor and, inspiration, let's drink some water right now. Because for some of you, it's still hot where you are. Maybe it's, 80, 90, over 100 degrees still, even though we're towards the end of August and almost into September. Water is important, so hydrate. Hydrate, you neurodivergent peeps. We never get enough water. But I am a proponent for hydration. So, continuing on. There are books to be bought, as I have been rambling on about being an author. I started writing a long time ago. I've been writing since forever, but I technically just published a couple of books from 2024 to the current year, this year, the year of our hecticness in 2025. And if you are interested in those, of course, there will be links below to my author's website, and there will be links to my author's page on Amazon, where I will say you can only buy books through the Amazon KDP author program is what I use. There are no other sellers of my novels. If you see my books on the web, which I have seen them on several websites, which I didn't consent to, please report them to me so that I can get them taken down. Because I didn't approve of them being on those websites, and I don't know why they're there. Rolling into that, number 4 on this list of housekeeping for coffee break. There is an ongoing situation with a fraudulent scammer on Amazon who's trying to scam people into buying a copy of a book titled Interviewing Stephen Haggard. This book, the actual book, is really important to me. It's part of my efforts to honor a fallen World War II soldier and an actor whose life has been shamefully left out of the history of World War II. He's been left unhonored, and I am part of some efforts to honor his legacy and his memory with the living heir of Stephen, who I've also had on this podcast. But please be aware that there is still a fraudulent seller. They're called Choco Books. That is CHOCOBOOKS. And they are attempting to scam people with a copy of my book that I know they don't have. And I know they don't have this because my numbers don't lie. I am a new author, and the most popular book and the most units I have sold for any book was Faithfully Yours Mozart. 25 units sold from December to, I think the last time I sold 2 copies of Faithfully Yours Mozart was sometime this past summer. I haven't sold any copies of the Stephen Haggard books yet. Yet being the operative word. But you really should buy it. I mean, it's on Amazon. And by the way, my books are international, so if you're an international listener, there's no excuse. You can't purchase your book. You can purchase my book in your country. But now moving on to number 5. As I said at the top of the hour, I began taking on more guests again, different guests. I enjoy having my peers on, as well as trying to open this podcast to new faces. And I have put the podcast on a site called podcastguest.com. I have the link to the Google submission, so if you are a listener and you happen to fit the criteria that I require on my podcast, which is that you're either neurodivergent or non-neurodivergent creative artist in the arts, you can submit to the show, and you can come onto my show, and we can have a conversation. I can ask you questions. I've gotten quite a handful of submissions. Not gonna lie, it was pretty cool. However, I would like to lay down a few ground rules and make clear what I will and will not tolerate on this show. Because I got a few submissions that I was like, I can't have you on my show because you're talking about really weird stuff in your submission. I don't take weird stuff, okay? This is not a mental health podcast. It's a very long list, and it's on the website. And here's a little side note from me. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, because that would just take too long, and I'm just going to do a short little update. But on my website, there is a section where you can go and you can click on the coffee break page on my author's website, and you can see what I do and will not, and don't want, So, on my podcast. And, also, well, okay, I am going to read at least this one part. And here's where I draw the line. I only speak to adults. This is a podcast for interviewing adults. And if you aren't one, you're not getting onto my show. I got a submission from somebody who, claimed to be, a teenager, underage. And I'm like, whoa. No. And here's the thing. I don't want to speak to anyone who's under 21 on anything. I'm very sorry. Now, here's one exception. If, say, you're a parent of a disabled child and you want to bring them on with you and you want to talk with them about their story, that's perfectly acceptable. That's perfectly fine. By themselves, however, is a massive no. And there are lots of no's on my list on my website, and these are just that's one of them that I need to add onto the website is no one under the age of 21, unless you're a parent with your young child and you're helping them to share their story, that's acceptable. But there's a lot of things, that, I just do not, I don't want to cross lines with. So, which will bring me to my concluding point. I have a lot of irons in the fire as well, of course. I'm not always going to be able to do this podcast on a consistent, regular basis. I am working on the audio drama adaptation of Faithfully Yours Mozart. I've got the Rebel. Blooper! Anyway, I've got the Redbubble going and trying to get sales there. I'm on a tiny bit of a break from major book writing. Of course, I'm dabbling with my manuscripts, but I'm just not in full writing mode. Really just trying to sell what's there for now with the 6 titles that are out. I'm gearing up to be a podcast guest on some shows very soon, this coming fall. And I'm going to continue to host new guests on Coffee Break. And at this point, I'm sure you, listener, are like, Faith, do you eat and hydrate and sleep and care for yourself? Yes, I do. I promise. Sounds like a lot. It probably is, on top of I'm actually trying to job hunt for something more permanent. As a person who is disabled, I am a freelance researcher, director, creative, artist, all these different things. But rather than just hoping for all the freelance stuff to really kind of come my way, it's hectic, insane, and exhausting. Low to the glories of BandLab. I love you, BandLab, but your 15-minute limit cap is, not always fun. Anyway, to finish out my last, little bit of this. What was I saying? Yes. Oh, yes. I'm job hunting for something a bit more permanent as a person who is disabled, rather than just hoping for some freelance stuff, as I've done, of course. I might have talked about this on socials. I was research and development, of course, on a little London West End workshop last year. That was a good experience, good on my resume. It was wonderful to be paid for the first time for something that I'm passionate about, which is research. You can find that on my resume, of course. But everything that I do by myself. People sit there sometimes and they go and they look at me and they're like, oh yeah, you or your team? And I'm like, you think I have a team? It's just me. I do everything. From the directing, the casting, the editing, the writing, the script writing. I handle my merch. I handle the podcast submissions. Life is, as I was failing to say before I took a pause, it is hectic, exhausting, and insane. But I am plodding along. I am trying my best. So as I close, know that even if this podcast doesn't always have consistent episodes and a billion episodes, because I can only do so much, I'm always working behind the scenes on much more than I tend to update here for. There is so much more coming, and that I can guarantee. And including, like I said, I have merch now for the podcast. I have books that I'm writing. I have an audio drama that I feel like you ought to check out called Faithfully Yours, Mozart, The Courtship. If you want to check out Chaotic Idiots, of course, there is now a book out for that. Like I said, everything's going to be linked below. I'm going to build a new link tree based on... I'm going to update my link tree to reflect everything that I have sort of kind of been doing. Because so much has happened in the last 8 years since I started this as a creator back in 2020, which is insane to me that I have been a creator in the arts of my little side of the indie world for about 8 years. It's insane to think it's 8 years. I started as a little nobody webtoon creator with less than maybe ideal art skills, and in 8 years I have become, maybe not a master at what I do, but I've become pretty good. I've become pretty good to the point that I know that I once heard somebody say, you've made it when you start to encounter opposition. And boy, have I encountered opposition. There was somebody who came to me one day because they called my Mozart series Mozart fanfiction, which I laugh because fanfiction doesn't require research, honey bun. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Fanfiction is something that teenagers like to write, and I was a teenager at one point, and I wrote fanfiction. But it's something shallow most of the time. It's usually self-insert OCs, shallow, and something that you do to have maybe a little bit of fun. It's nothing you take seriously. Whereas the pile of books on my shelf that were used to create Faithfully Yours Mozart, I spent over probably nearly $100 USD in research. And then some. So, you don't do that, and have the kind of career that I do. But they came to me and they called me a professional. And I laughed and I thought, that's funny. They think I'm a professional. I've only been at this 8 years. And then, I'm going to ramble for a minute. I was going to close, but let's ramble for a second. Rambles with Faith. Let's go back to the old adage. This was something when I started the podcast, and these episodes are gone, but I had a different idea for a coffee break at the time. This is your mocha is hot, Faith moment, as I used to say. It is right now very hot. But I came, they say never to Google yourself. I did. Because, when you've been at something for 8 years, you kind of sit there and you think to yourself, dear God, am I making headway? Am I making any kind of dent? Well, it turns out I did make some kind of dent, because I looked myself up and it was like, ah yes, Faith Jacobs, an influential public figure, and I went, whoa, wait a minute. A friend of mine called me out and they were like, hey, it was like, I think you've earned it. I'm like, I don't know if I have. I had an epiphany, it's one of those things. It's like 8 years and you're doing this, and it's like I wouldn't consider myself a household name, because if I were a household name, I feel like with some other things that I'm doing behind the scenes that I can't talk about yet, but dear stars, if you just knew all the rejections and all the things, it's like I'm not a household name yet, but I've been asked to do some interesting things, sure. I don't think I'm influential. That's an interesting, way to think about me. But, I'm no longer this little nobody that kind of came out of the woodworks in 2020 with an idea and was like, it's called Chaotic Idiots. This is my baby. Like it? And it's still my baby. I still love Chaotic Idiots. I'm jesting and joking around and being kind of funny. But you do, in all seriousness, you do sit there and you go, gee, like back to the Googling yourself thing, which you should probably sometimes never do. But you do sometimes sit there and you go, boy, do I really want to, am I making headway? Is what I'm doing, getting any sort of traction? And I guess in some ways it has, because I have looked up my name. It's like in the event that like somebody wants to do research on me, like what comes up really is my intent, is what pops up and what are they gonna see, like what will they see? My website, will they see my author website, will they see my Goodreads page, my Amazon, like what's gonna pop up? And so I look at these things and I go, wow, okay, so maybe in some really weird way that I didn't realize happened, I in some strange way became a pseudo-public figure. And there were some people who I don't think understood that that's what happened to me. And I'm like, do you understand that like this is, it's different. Things change when you get the label of like public figure. Like it really does shift, because then you're very responsible for your image, and I'm not responsible. I have no agent. I have nobody who is representing me. I represent myself, and I intend to for the rest of my creative and natural life. Because anything that I do will ultimately be in my hands. I'm not going to have somebody sit there and tell me, fix this and make it better. No. I'm going to, fix it and make it more palatable to this society. No. It's going to be done according to my standards. Because I, as a neurodivergent individual, and welcome to the Tangent Express, but I, as a neurodivergent individual, have for years tried to I tried to fit everything that I was to other people's standards, and eventually at some point you reach an age and you reach a point in your life where you go, I'm just not going to fit anybody's standards anymore. I'm going to fit my own. So all in all, tying this back to being a public figure, I had an epiphany, and I realized that the things that I was doing were catching the eyes of other people, and there were people around me who unfortunately didn't understand that I was no longer the same. I am no longer the same creator who was just sitting there going, yeah, let's make chaotic idiots, and it's okay if we take a long time to do this. Not really. There is a pressure and an expectation when you start to sort of be put into the public eye. And that was the one thing I feared. I had always said to friends of mine, and some of them, some friends, colleagues, people who I've known in the industry, and I've said to, one of them didn't get it. I was like, I am afraid of success. I am afraid to be successful. Not because I'm seeking validation. You need to learn the difference between making an assumption of why somebody might fear success. No, I fear success because then my life is under a microscope. And when I started seeing the traction that I was making, 8 years in, far from where I was, it gives you as a creator pause to say, boy, what in the world? What do people think of me? What do people, and I've heard from people who I respect in the industry for years not to give credence or give leeway to those, unseen eyes, what do people think of me as this creator? Because I'm slowly getting to that point. I'm not there yet, but I will. But I get the feeling that eventually, one of these days, I will be there, and I'll never. I'll be in a place I never thought I would ever be when I started out this path, and I would say that this path started long before 2020. It just so happened that I began pursuing it publicly and more boldly in 2020. This began back in 2018, and eventually maybe I'll do a solo episode with me where I just kind of ramble and talk about, and have some talking points and talk about that stuff, because I my whole life has been spent trying to be what other people wanted me to be, not what I wanted to be. And when I began boldly pursuing what I wanted to be, life changed. It didn't get easier. There's an easier way to make a living than the arts. There's an easier way to get recognition than the arts, But the arts are where I thrive. Because everyone else and their mother has laughed at me or talked down to me or put me in places and boxes that they thought I could fit into when I didn't. And I'm like, well, this is what I'm good at. You don't understand it, but it's not about you. It's about what I want. And then so I suppose to wrap this up, because again, there's only 15 minutes and I don't feel like doing another segment because I've talked long enough. And this was really just a housekeeping episode, and then turned into Faith is realizing that she's turned into a public figure. Kinda, sorta. Not again. I'm not a household name, but if you had come to me 8 years ago and said you're gonna go to London, and you're gonna do some things, and some of it's gonna hurt, and some of it's gonna feel great, and there's gonna be pain, and there's gonna be blessings, and there's gonna be beautiful things, I would have said to you, you're crazy. I don't have the money to go to London. I don't have anything. I'm nobody. And I've slowly begun realizing that 8 years and then some tacked on, I am really, really, really becoming somebody. And again, not a household name, because otherwise I think certain things would be taken off the ground and people might believe in me a little bit more. People who don't necessarily know me might take a chance, and they haven't. And you know who you are. You have received my emails, and you have rejected me. But I digress. At the end of the day, For coffee break, as I'm going to say, take care, be kind, and thank you for listening.